Hello, my name's Karen Hustler and I'm the Assistant Director of Fellowship and Awards at Advance HE. When people are applying for accreditation, the first criterion number 1, is all about the institutional commitment to the accredited programmes and schemes. So in some respects, when starting to plan for accreditation, this is the first important consideration. In this criteria, then, it's important to think about what the institution is trying to achieve with the accredited programmes and schemes it's proposing. So this is where the institutional strategy and all the policies and procedures around teaching and learning and the development of staff that teach and learn is really important. So the first criteria is all about the institution's approach to teaching and learning. And in here, we're asking people to talk about the size of their institution, the types of students that they have, which could be quite a diverse range of international students in some instances, or it might be quite a narrow set of students who are all quite specialist, for example, in a medical school. And so it's important for you to talk about the types of students you've got, the numbers of staff you've got supporting them, and to talk about how accreditation, fellowship and the UK professional standards framework are going to fit into your plans for student and staff development. We're not expecting that the institution will have fellowship and the professional standards framework embedded explicitly into every policy and strategy around teaching and learning. The group of people who will look at your accreditation submission are far more interested in seeing how you approach teaching and learning, what your priorities and strategies for teaching and learning are over the next 3 to 4 years of the accreditation cycle, but also thinking about where your priorities for the development of staff fit into this. So this will be a really good place to talk about how many of the staff engaged at the institution have fellowship already and which types of fellowship they have. That helps us to really understand what the internal capacity to support people to get fellowship and also to review their applications for fellowship is at this current moment in time. You are also able to use your accredited programmes and schemes with any collaborative partner institutions you may have. So this is where there's a validation agreement in place already. So, for example, a university may validate programmes at a local college or colleges elsewhere, or perhaps on overseas partners. And it's fine to use your accredited programmes and schemes in these places, providing that you tell us all about the infrastructure and the approach you're going to take with that, to make sure that people in all those places will have the same sort of experience as staff based at your main campus. All of this has to be set out in your accreditation submission. So the first criterion 1A, is around those strategies and policies, both around teaching and learning and the development of your staff, to include the HR processes. So, for example, lots of places now are including fellowship as their probationary requirement, or possibly in their promotions criteria, senior or principal fellow often are linked to things like the promotion to reader, professor, or other senior posts in teaching and learning. We don't want to see full strategy or policy documents, however. We want you to just insert some excerpts that give a flavour for how you're approaching teaching and learning and the UK PSF and fellowship. Criterion 1B is around the rationale for what you're putting forward. And if you've been accredited before, this is a place to talk about what's worked well and what you've still found to be challenging, and any changes that you're making this time round in your next accreditation cycle. It's really helpful, whether you've been accredited before or not, to set out some key data here in tables, so things like the number of fellows at each category, the number of mentors that you plan to have to support the provision, the types of participants that you're going to be supporting, and how each of the programmes or schemes that you're putting forward is going to be relevant to the development of that group of staff. Our reviewers will want to see a clear rationale for what you're proposing and why you think that's important to your institution and how that has been designed to meet our criteria. The third criteria point in Criterion 1 is 1C, and this is about quality assurance at an institutional level. So in this section of the application, we're expecting to see how the governance of quality assurance and enhancement around fellowship is going to be managed at an institutional level. So for example, an examination board for a postgraduate certificate may be awarding fellowship at that point. Or for an experienced scheme, then a group of reviewers operating through a central team may be awarding fellowship categories. We would want to know how the quality assurance of those two different things are coming together so that they're seen through senior level committees to do with teaching and learning and the development of staff. And also enhancement of these programmes, how that's part of your annual review cycle of quality enhancement as an institution. Often diagrams are really helpful in this section of the submission to show how the reporting upwards from all the different parts of the institution that might be engaged with fellowship are all coming together to be scrutinised at senior level, so that we make sure that the senior level strategy and policy is lining up with what's happening in your staff development programmes, and that will make sure that everything has maximum effect. Also, all the reviewers and mentors that are engaged with your programmes or your scheme need to engage in regular CPD, which is related to the UK Professional Standards Framework and Fellowship. Advance HE run a wide variety of different programmes which might be useful for you to adopt as part of this strategy of ongoing CPD for these people. But we are expecting that the institution will take responsibility for making sure that everyone connected with fellowship in your institution engages in regular CPD as relevant to their role in your scheme or programme, and that you are checking to see that they are engaging with the development on offer. Where you've got people perhaps in different countries or operating on different campuses, it's really important to talk about how those people are going to be able to engage in the development you've got on offer. And then the fourth criteria under Criteria 1D, is about the resources. In this part, we'd like you to predict ahead how many people you think are going to take part in each of the programmes and schemes that you may be putting forward, perhaps over the next couple of years. And there, what we're looking for is to see that you have the adequate resource in place, usually in terms of the staff who are delivering and supporting these programmes, to make sure that all of the participants will have the support that they need and that the review process will be rigorous. Here, this is really important if you've got collaborative partners. You may be offering a slightly different model to those collaborative partners. So, for example, you might be doing a flying faculty approach where some of your staff are going out and delivering in blocks of time rather than in a week-to-week basis. And here we'd like to see information that tells us which of the programmes and schemes that you're offering, where you're offering it, what the model of delivery is, how many staff are supporting it, how many mentors are perhaps being trained in that place so that participants there can have localised support, or if everything's online, how many mentors you have and how many mentees each one of those will have. Many institutions offer workload allocation to people who are reviewing or mentoring to make sure that their role is supported. And also how the line managers involved with the participants are also being trained to understand what's on offer to their participants, what the likely workload implication is for those people, and also how that's going to operate as part of the annual performance enhancement review that you might be carrying on as part of your HR processes. It's often helpful to use tables in that section so that we can clearly see how many people you're expecting to go through and what kind of capacity you've got in place at each location to support that. Often the things that are in Criterion 1 need to go through senior level committees to be approved and to make sure that the adequate resource is in place. So I would recommend that a scheme or programme leader who's wanting to start to develop a submission for accreditation might want to work on this criteria first, And that should make sure then that the things that need to be improved by the institution before they come through in a submission are able to go through all the right committees and processes in a timely manner, as these committees are only likely to be held 2 or 3 times a year, and the senior people who may need to approve these processes have busy diaries. So my recommendation is to start writing Criterion 1 quite early on in the process, and to make sure that the strategies and priorities that are important to the institution and to the development of staff really are maximised in benefit through the way in which you're designing your programmes and schemes.